Greetings, my name is Kerry and this is Kerry Louise Reads. In this video I will be wrapping up 2022, I will be going over my stats for the year and I'll be looking back at my 2022 goals and how well I didn't do at them and then setting some goals for 2023. 2022 was quite a challenging year in a lot of ways for me. If you've been following my channel, you'll know that I had an unexpected hiatus at the start of the year. I didn't really produce any content for several months because of my health. I was diagnosed with a chronic illness in February and it had a really big impact on not the diagnosis so much. The realities of the chronic illness had an impact on my energy levels, in particular fatigue sucks and particularly the energy required for editing videos has been quite elusive, but we're in a more stable position now and I'm really enjoying editing videos again, so hopefully I'll be able to catch up a little bit and start producing content for you more regularly again. We'll see. That's kind of one of my goals we'll get to in a little bit. But to start with, let's go through my 2022 stats. So I've got my laptop here if you see me looking down. Okay, so I read a total of 115 books in 2022, which isn't too bad. It's slightly, well, it's quite a bit down from 2021 because in 2021 I managed to do 31 books in 31 days in July. So that really boosted my figures. And actually, along with the fatigue affecting my ability to edit, I had a few slumpy months. Yeah, particularly October, February and June were a bit lower. And then I had some better months as well. So I was finishing on average 10 books a month probably. Not quite, because that would have been 120. But I'm really happy with 115 as a total, considering everything that happened last year. So let's start with publication centuries. Interestingly, 92 of the books were published in the 21st century. That is the overwhelming majority. 22 books were published in the 20th century and 1 book was published in the 19th. One thing that I am unofficially trying to do this year in 2023 is read some more classics, because I didn't read a lot of classics last year. So hopefully next year that number from the 19th century will be a little bit higher. We'll see. The length of the books. Again, the overwhelming majority were less than 500 pages. 106 books were between 1 and 500 pages. I read 8 books that were between 500 and 1,000 pages, and I read 1 book that was over 1,000 pages. That's not surprising because longer books take more effort. So we'll see what happens with that this year. I would hope that I'll maybe be reading more in the 500 to 1,000 page arena, but we'll see. Where the books came from. So this, I will be coming back to. One of my goals was to read more from my backlist. It didn't happen quite in the way that I would have hoped, really. So 22 books were from my physical backlist and 7 were from my digital backlist. That was nowhere near what I was hoping for. 25 of the books were ones that I obtained during the year 2022. So, I mean, that's not too bad that I was reading books when I'd attained within the year of getting them. We'll get to in a little bit how many books I actually acquired, and yeah, we'll see why that is maybe slightly more problematic. And then 49 books were ones that I borrowed from the library, which in some ways is good because using the library is better than buying all the books. I still bought a lot of books though. 6 books were ones that I borrowed from friends or family, and 6 books were rereads. Okay, ratings. Let's work up from the bottom. So I didn't give any books 1 star or 1.5 stars, which is pretty good. I gave 5 books 2 stars and 6 books 2.5 stars, which actually is rare for me to be reading that many books that I enjoyed that little. I gave 11 books 3 stars and 18 books 3.5 stars. I gave the vast majority, kind of my most common rating was 4 stars, so it was 44 books I gave 4 stars. I gave 8 books 4.5 stars, and I gave 23 books 5 stars. This was the first year that I really did half stars, and that's as I'm moving gradually over from Goodreads to Storygraph. It enabled me to have that bit of nuance, which really helped. I also DNF'd 2 books, but only 2, which isn't too bad actually. 2 books that I disliked enough to give up on them. The format of the book. So the majority of the books were paperbacks. That was 75 books. 18 were hardback and 22 were ebooks. So not too bad on the ebook front there. I've got a growing backlist of ebooks that I want to try and get down, so I'm glad to have been reading some of them. And I didn't read any audiobooks at all actually, or graphic novels, so there's occasionally 1 or 2 of those, but there weren't any last year. So the target audiences for the books, 2 were for children, 12 were young adult, and then 101 were adult. So actually I've kind of moved away a little bit from young adult books. I was reading a lot more of them previously, but that's okay. And who knows, I mean, next year I may pick up more young adult books again. I kind of feel like I was reading more high fantasy, more literary fiction, a lot more romances this year, inspired by my research. So that probably explains it, really. Okay, let's do genres. So I read 1 anthology. The biggest genre was Christian non-fiction, which is not surprising considering I'm doing a PhD in theology. 4 classics, 11 contemporaries, 8 contemporary romance, 1 dystopian, 1 essay anthology, 9 fantasy, 2 gothic horror, 7 historical, 1 historical fantasy, 2 historical romance, 5 inspirational romance, which is the topic of my research, so again that's not that surprising, 4 magical realism, 1 memoir, 4 mysteries, 10 non-fiction, 3 romance, straight romance, 1 romantic suspense, 3 sci-fi, 1 science fantasy, 1 short story anthology, 6 speculative fiction, 2 thrillers, and 3 urban fantasy. So quite a mix of genres actually, and other than Christian non-fiction, not that many that were much more contemporaries than I would say I usually would read. And actually it's slightly surprising that contemporary is the highest, because usually I would have said that fantasy or science fiction were more, and actually very little science fiction last year. That's quite interesting. Anywho, for the publishers, I wasn't officially tracking, I wasn't aiming to read from lots of indie publishers last year the way I have done in previous years. So I was slightly surprised to realise that it was almost half and half, and I think just because I'm more aware of publishers now, I maybe have a tendency to pick up indie publishers more often. I think also a lot of theology books tend to be from independent publishers, which probably helps as well towards that. So anyway, there were 58 books from Big 5 publishers and 57 from indie publishers, so pretty much equal. Author nationalities, the biggest ones there were American and British, 34 each for white American, white British. 5 African American, 1 Australian, 1 Bangladeshi, 1 Arab British, 1 British Asian Canadian, 1 British Austrian Jewish, 1 British Egyptian, 2 British Indian, 1 British Nigerian, 1 British Pakistani, 2 British Trinidadian, 1 Canadian, 2 Caribbean American, 1 Chinese, 4 Chinese American, 1 Dominican, 2 French, 1 French Moroccan, 1 Indian, 3 Indian American, 1 Irish, 1 Italian, 1 Japanese American, 1 Japanese, 1 Korean American, 1 Malaysian, 2 Mexican Canadian. There's actually 1 author, but I read 2 books of hers. 2 books had multiple authors of different nationalities, 1 Nigerian, 1 Swedish, 1 Taiwanese American, and 1 Zimbabwean. So for author ethnicities, I just realised that one of my stats was wrong, on one of the tables, which means I've actually done way better at this particular stat than I thought. Well, not way better, but it's changed the chart by 2 whole %. Anywho, for author ethnicities, 49 of the books were from authors from marginalised ethnicities and 65 were from white authors, and then there was 1 book which had multiple authors of different ethnicities. So that means that my percentage of marginalised authors I thought was 41%, is actually 43%. 43, which I'm really chuffed with. I'm really, really pleased with that. My goal was over 40% to be from authors from marginalised ethnicities, not including anthologies. So for it to actually be 43, in some ways I'm kind of quite pleased that that stat was wrong. It was from May that the stat was wrong. So that meant in the later half of the year I was pushing myself to read more from marginalised authors to try and get the percentage up, when if I'd had the stat right then I wouldn't have been prioritising them as much. So yeah, that's really good. And then my goal for next year will be to try and increase that percentage. So that just makes the challenge slightly harder for me for next year, but never mind. For author genders, 24 of the books were written by cisgendered men. 80 of the books were from cisgendered women. 3 of the books were from multiple authors of different genders. 7 of the books were from non-binary or genderqueer authors, and 1 book was from a transgender male author. Again, that's not too bad. I think my number of transgender authors was slightly higher again than last year, which I'm really pleased with, and every year I'm going to be trying to increase that. Even if it just goes up by 1 each year, then I feel really positive about that. In terms of author diversity more generally, I did struggle with some of these, and I think that's just because it's difficult to do all the things all the time. So 50 of the books featured authors of marginalised ethnicities. 14 of the books were from authors from the LGBTQIA+ community. That is really low compared to other years. 9 of the books were from authors with a disability. 10 of the books were from authors with mental illness, and 3 of the books were from neurodiverse authors. So I want to try and improve all of those stats. I figured out the percentage of how many of the books featured diverse authors for each of those categories, and other than marginalised ethnicity, all of those were lower than the previous year. So next year I want to do better and try and increase the percentage for each category, and that'll work out based on percentage because it depends how many books I read in that year. Anyway, nearly there. For character diversity, it wasn't quite as bad, and I think for most of these it was on par or increased from the previous year. So 64 of the books contained characters from marginalised ethnicities, 27 of the books had LGBTQIA+ characters, 33 of the books had disabled characters, 40 of the books had characters with mental illness, and 16 of the books had neurodiverse characters. Again, I'd like to increase that. My challenges I did not do very well on. So I had a number of TBR lists last year. There was the gift list, the subscription list, the oldest on the TBR list, and the series to complete list. The gift list had 20 books on it. I read 5 books in total that were from my bigger gift spreadsheet. A couple of those were on that specific list. So I read 2 that were on a list of 20, and then I read 3 others that were from the bigger spreadsheet. So not great. Subscriptions equally, I had a list of 20. I read 4 that were from the subscription list, plus 1 additional one. So that was 5 in total. Still not great. The oldest on the TBR list had 18 books on it, 11 from the physical TBR and 7 from my digital TBR. I finished 2 of them. I am also partway through 2 of the digital ones, but yeah, again, not great. And then series. I finished 5 of the series on my series to finish list, and I finished an additional series which was 6 series. I was aiming for 12. Again, not great, but I did make progress with several of the other series, and I'll go into all of those in more detail when I do the updates of those TBR lists for this year in an upcoming video. The other 2 challenges were review books. Review books, I aim to read 2 a month, read and review 2 books a month. I finished 10 review books, which was not great, but actually I didn't request a lot more review books. I did request a few, but not loads. So my NetGalley ratio stayed the same. It was 28% at the beginning of the year, 28% at the end of the year. And then my other challenge was read around the world. I usually aim for 1 book a month for that. I managed 5 books, which is less than I would have hoped, but never mind. We'll try again this year. So I'm keeping those same challenges, and in the next part of the video, I will go into my goals a bit more. The final thing to do is just go back to my summary. This is the terrible bit. My Goodreads to read start count at the beginning of this year was 675 books. At the end of the year, it was 876. I acquired over 200 books I don't understand how that happened. I know I did a lot of charity shopping. The vast majority of the books I acquired was from charity shops. I was also given a few books. My ebook to read count at the start of the year was 126. By the end of the year it had gone up to 168. Some of those were review, some of those were ones I bought or was given. Not great. Actually, most of those were review. My reviews to read start count was 47 and at the end of the year was 75. So yeah, acquired more review books than I realised, really. But my NetGalley ratio stayed the same. It ended on 28%, so we're going to try and work on that this year. I bought 203 books and I read 18 of those. I was given 36 books and I didn't read any, which is not great. I acquired 52 ebooks, most of them were for review, and I read 6 of them, and then I borrowed 53 books and read 35 of them. Doing pretty well at returning library books. I think that's enough of the depressing stats. Let's go on to the depressing goals. So my book budget fell apart, as I've mentioned a few times, and we'll get into the goals for how I'm gonna revamp that in a minute. TBR going down clearly didn't happen. It increased by quite a substantial amount, blaming it on my health. In NetGalley, I didn't do a lot of reading for review, but my ratio stayed the same. I've gone into my challenges already, so I'm not going to go over those again. Okay, diversity were the 2 areas that I actually did all right in. Over 40% of my reading was from authors from marginalised ethnicities. As I mentioned, it was actually 43%, which I'm really pleased about. The percentage of trans authors I read increased as well. And as I say, as long as that keeps going up a little bit every year, I'll feel happy with that. Indie books, as I mentioned, also stayed at roughly 50% without me actually focusing on reading indies. So really pleased with that too. The other diversity markers, as I mentioned, I wasn't actively focusing on them, so mostly they didn't increase. So I will be trying to increase those. My main channel goal was to review more books. I did do some reviews last year, but not that many. Not great. So 2022 is done. It's over. It wasn't a great year for me, as I mentioned at the top of this video. I'm hopeful that 2023 will be better, and I have some goals that'll hopefully help me to make it a really good year. So for my book goals, I'm changing the way I do my book budget. This is the biggest thing, I think. I realised that part of the problem, so my budget was based on the length of the book. I would get more money for reading longer books. That was fine. It kind of worked, but what I've decided to do is change how that works so that it encourages me to read from my backlist more. Instead of getting £1 for every book and then £2 if it's over 500 pages and £3 if it's over 1,000 pages, it stays at a standard £1 per book, but I'll get an additional pound for every challenge that that book meets. So if I read a book that's from my subscription list, also counts for Read Around the World, for example, I'll get an additional pound for each of those things, if that makes sense. I'll also get an additional pound if it's a book that continues a series. So if it's the second book in a series, I'll get £2 for reading that. If it completes a series, I'll get another additional pound. So anything that completes a series, a final book in a series, when I finish it, I get £3 for that book. As I mentioned, I think if a book meets more than one challenge, then I get the bonus for each of the challenges that it meets. If I happen to read a book that was given to me and completed a series, for example, then I'd get £1 for reading it in general, then an additional pound for it being from my gift list, plus £2 for completing a series. So I could get £4 for that book. So that's the basics of how the budget is going to work. Every month there will also be the additional, what I'm calling the backlist bonus. So this will be a £2 bonus for every month where the majority of the books are from my backlist. So if it's 50% of the books being from my backlist or higher, then I'll get a £2 bonus to go in my book budget. So this is to encourage me to read from my backlist more. Some of the lists, when I get into them, do the TBR list videos, you'll see that actually some of the books aren't from my backlist, particularly the series list and Read Around the World lists. They include some library books just to help with mood reading and that sort of thing, but I don't need to buy any books to complete any of the challenges this year, which was one of the flaws with the lists last year. And because I'm moving in the summer, the aim is I'm going to try really hard not to buy any books before I move. I may occasionally need to buy them for book club or for uni, but other than that, I'm trying to declutter pre-move. So I've just been offered a job for when I finish my course in the summer. I want to make that move as easy as possible by not having ridiculous numbers of boxes of books. All my books will be coming out of storage at that point as well. So it's in my interest to move fewer books, so I'm going to try and declutter. And also when I get the books out of storage, I'm going to have an unhaul. I say this every year, I'm really going to be trying this year to get my TBR down. Part of that is to be buying less books, and part of that is reading through the backlist, and there will be a bit of unhauling maybe in the future as well. So my physical TBR, as I mentioned, is currently in the 870s, 876. I want to get that down to around the 800 mark. I think that's achievable within the year, and if I read all of the books on the TBR lists, I will do that if I don't buy any more books. My digital backlist, I want to try and get down to 130, so that's currently on 163. And again, if I manage 2 review books per month plus the ones on my oldest on my TBR digital list, then that should be achievable as well if I don't request more books. And I think I'm realising more this year that the more books I add to the list, the harder it is to get that number down. Why it's taken me so long to realise this, I don't know. Anyway, so we're aiming for at least 50% of all my reading to be from my backlist. We'll have the backlist bonus if that works. For NetGalley, I am aiming again to improve my ratio. That will partly be through not requesting very much, which I'm not doing actually anyway. I'm not requesting loads anyway. So I'm aiming for roughly reading 2 review books per month, and I want to write the review within a month of reading the book, because I didn't manage to do that at all last year. I had to write all the reviews right at the end of the year when I couldn't remember very much about some of the books. So I'm aiming to write the reviews within a month of reading the books, and then I really liked doing the very short reviews, the 3-minute or less reviews. I did a couple of them last year. I think that format really works for me, so hopefully that will be the format I'll do most of my reviews in moving forward. So for my challenges, as I mentioned, we're keeping the same challenges as last year. Oldest on my TBR has 20 books on it. That's 9 physical books and 11 digital books. There are 12 series on my series I want to finish list, with multiple numbers of books in each series to go. 20 books on the gift list, 20 books on the subscription box list. I'm aiming for at least 20 review books, roughly 2 a month, but 20 to 24 for that, and 12 books on the Read Around the World list. I will be doing TBR lists for all of those things, so those videos are coming in the next couple of months, hopefully. As an additional incentive, if at the end of the year I've managed to complete all of the books on each of those lists, then I will get an additional bonus in my budget. There may be some flexibility around that. So for example, with the gift list, if I've read 20 books that were given to me, but they're not necessarily the 20 on the list, I might still give myself the bonus. I haven't definitely decided how that's going to work yet. Diversity goals. We're going to aim again for 40% of books from authors of colour, marginalised ethnicities. We're going to try and get more than last year. So last year I managed 43%. We're going to aim for at least 43% again. We're going to aim for more transgender authors. So last year I read from 8 transgender authors. We're going to aim for at least the same, if not more, this year. And then I'm going to try and maintain or increase the percentages for the other author diversity markers that I didn't do quite so well on this year. We're going to be trying to increase those as well. So I think that's all of my goals. Let me know if you made any reading goals for this year. Let me know how you got on with goals if you made them last year. Let me know any tips you have for not buying books, because I seem to really struggle with not buying books. So have a chat to me down in the comments, or if you just want to let me know that you've been here, leave me a New Year's emoji, because it's a new year. You can also like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also follow me on social media. All that information will be listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!